Okay, everything is set. Today, it's gonna be a fun day. Sometimes, most of the time, when I'm online and I find things or I'm doing things, I usually find a bunch of like random things out there that just don't really make sense. I tend to find a lot of like weird, random artifacts on the internet in the form of games, and I like to go through them sometimes to see what they are. The thing is that I like to go through them all in one single day, and today is that day. We're not gonna get through every single one, I don't think, because I think some of these are much longer, and we may need like to circle back to some of these. I'm putting like a 2-hour limit on like all of these, not like all of them in 2 hours, but like each one gets like a 1 to 2 hour limit, because we have so many things to go through. We have about, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 things I want to go through. There was one more thing, but I was like, I'll save that for like a horror game day, which is going to come out soon anyway. So we're going to see how this is going to go. Of course, some things might be terrifying. I am a screamer, so just be worried about that. I mean, just be aware of that. Sorry, I mean you can be worried about that, but be aware of it too. But welcome to today's show. There's a lot to talk about that I found interesting, and also it's spawning a lot of different discussions. And it's very valid discussions, but I find that people get very vitriolic on the internet in general. So I'm going to throw my hat into the ring and see if I can just show you guys what this stuff is without getting hammered by it. As well, a slight update on the things. The video chat reading session may be a bit delayed by like a week, because I'm still not done this like one work thing, and I'm worried that I won't have enough time. I've just been very like slow on certain work things. It's taking a toll on like VOD upload times and edit times and stuff like that. So we'll have to see. But I'm hoping it gets done sooner rather than later. I also have a fair number of topics that I want to try, but I want to do them justice, and I want to see if I can test run a couple of easier topics first, and then we'll see how to like do crazier things with that concept of like us being in like a VR chat room, like reading things. It's gonna be weird because it's gonna be like half reading, half like not like podcast, but more like a learning session. Like if imagine you're at like a library, right? And they host one of those like expert sections, sections. And then you have like somebody come in and they're like telling you things, and you get to have like a Q&A, like a presentation, but not as structured as like a presentation, and more just like an open forum for like everyone there to like speak to this person. I'm still working out some details, because there's also details of like how do I integrate the Twitch chat in like a way. But it looks like I'm gonna have to make a custom server that runs locally, because the only way to load external content is through a video browser. So there's things I need to figure out to make it work. So it might be delayed by like a week. So give it like a month again, because a week has already passed since I last said it. Right? I think. Holy shit! It's February 18th. What the fuck? Yeah. So give it like a month. Sometime around March 20th is when it should be done. That's what I'm aiming for, at least. In other news, there's a problem on my website, as you may notice here and there. The problem is that right now I manually update it. I manually do a push to a certain thing, because I don't want to rely on like too many scripts on my site. But I am going to add just one single script to automatically cycle through like the next stream timing and like stuff. And then maybe to check if I'm live and to push it back or something, but it depends. That will come out during the next month as well. All this development stuff for the website, for the new segments of this show, it's all gonna be done by next month roughly. Because once I'm done this like work stuff, I can then focus everything onto this one thing and just do it all. So it's good. There's been some interesting developments in the world, but the main thing that I want to talk about that is at least not super related to something that's wild going on is that OpenAI's new model for video generation from a text. I don't know if you all have seen this, but it's surprisingly stable compared to what was already there. I don't know how to explain this, but god damn it, it's all these pussy and bio bots, dude. I have like 1 million pussy and like bio bots following me every single time. I don't want your pussy and bio. Get the shit out of here, dude. What the fuck? There are hundreds of these bots. Hundreds. Like, actually hundreds to thousands of these bots. As noted in... What the... It's just a random spam comment. What is this? See if I can pull it up. Let's see. Here we go. Now, this is going to be an interesting thing that's going to, pop up here and there that you're going to see a lot of in the coming years. But let me see if I can sort of like show this well. This is, oh god. Why is this window capture always on? There we go. So do that, and then there we go. I gotta hide all the stuff on the side. Actually, I shouldn't even show you my Twitter because, like, honest to God, sometimes I scroll down on like Twitter and there's just straight up like porn ads. And I'm like, what the fuck is this? You know what I mean? Like, it's like, dude, like, it feels impossible to use this site in like any capacity without potentially getting nuked. But OpenAI released a new text-to-video model named Sora. Okay, now this thing is surprisingly effective at giving a fairly convincing output. There's obviously issues, right? Like if you look here on this frame, you may notice that it is a sky pan shot, but the two main subjects in the video, they're like walking. The way that they're walking, let me maximize this even more. They're walking through and on top of the roof. And it's almost like they're on an entirely different plane and they're just like green screened into it, because they're also significantly taller than every other human in the shot. And that person just disappeared. This person over here, look. They just go somewhere and they disappear in like literally into nothingness. They like melt. So there are some issues with this, right? And it'll get better over time. However, the crazy thing is that it's even gotten this far. So if you know existing models, Corridor Digital did their rock paper scissors series. Very, very entertaining series, because it's like the story that was written is like so stupid. It's just a story about like rock paper scissors being like the main way of performing combat, and then the like guy who like does the OK sign, and if you stare at it, then you're dead, right? Or like something. It's very silly, very, very silly. But that was sort of the early model, and you saw a lot of the issues that they had to go through. And they talked about it somewhat, where they had to composite each and every single frame. You see some people's attempts with it through like image to vid or vid to vid, sort of like pieces of like technology. I'm just gonna call it that. Again, I'm trying to explain this in like the most layperson way possible. So me saying library doesn't mean anything. But basically, every single time thus far, there's been no context, and you've had to work very, very hard to give context. And even then, the form will shift between frames because it's not very easy to keep it consistent all throughout. This is a fairly stable, contextually aware model, as in like it stays consistent in the way it makes things, right? Like these things stay the same. The subjects don't morph into somebody new. These subjects stay the exact same subject, even though this is probably the worst thing, because it's like this feels like just a strip, and like some people melt and like stuff. But for the most part, even like the angles of like things stays relatively stable. The buildings don't change shape all of a sudden. They just look weird from the outset, and the model doesn't know what to do when things go out of frame, right? It doesn't have a real understanding of the world, but it has enough of an understanding that it can say like, hey, like I want these people to stay the exact same because that's the point of this. That's the point of this tool. That's the point of showing somebody on video, is that they stay consistent, or like that's the result of recording someone, is that they stay the same person all throughout, and that these buildings can't just magically morph into something else, right? That's a huge step up compared to the current way it's doing things. There's a whole sociological element to this that I think people. I'm not gonna scroll down. The comment section is like a landmine in terms of like, you know, how vitriolic it's getting. And you see this mindset, you know, no matter where you read discussion on AI stuff in general, whether it's on here on Twitter, on Hacker News, which is supposedly supposed to be like a very more methodical, more informed, more, you know, cooled down place to talk about most things. AI seems to bring out, you know, the best in the voice of people in like many different ways. But it's getting to a point where you can do a lot of interesting things with this tool that you wouldn't have been able to beforehand. So there's a lot of obvious use cases, right? If you're like a nascent director and you don't have the funds to do anything, you can use this to generate a fairly interesting looking setup for like a scene. Obviously it's not perfect, because if you look at it, Like there's a phantom tree kind of here. You see, it's kind of like melding into the box here. Like there's like details that are off, right? But a lot of filmmaking has a lot of like boring elements behind the scenes too, of like storyboarding or compositing or in between shots. This is really good for in between shots. A B-roll shot of the New York skyline is like it's a whatever shot. Like you just do it, but you have to have money to like do it, and it'll at least cost you $500 to like do it. So it's like as like a small developer, as like a small director, what options do you really have? It's interesting in that it'll make the skill floor a lot lower, but it also has that sociological impact that all AI tools involving art will eventually have, and in general, all tools that are intended to replace some process that we have today manually will have, and that's what happens to the people who like lose their roles. And this is a problem that has plagued technology since the very beginning, right? We haven't had the luxury to be able to think about what that means and how to prevent that, because for a long time the world was very, very poor, and I mean that in like a very literal sense, in that like quite literally, most people just didn't have enough money for like things. Most people didn't even have like space to like do anything. I mean, most people didn't even have like food, right? And so in like at the time, like a lot of wars and a lot of conflict was happening. There was a lot of corruption, and we're very, very lucky that today, in general, it's lower than it was before. In general, this is like the crazy thing is that the world is trending towards being better, but also getting worse. And so it's like overall we're getting better. It's just the negative impacts of the things that are bad feel worse because everything else is getting better, but these things stay the same, right? It's same but different, you know what I mean? And so we never really had the luxury of being able to question like what is the point of this technology, and also like what do we do with people who are going to lose their roles from a technology shift, right? There are many things that you will never be able to get rid of, because that's kind of like what you want almost. You want somebody to like listen to you and like talk to you, for instance, and you want to have like a real human connection in like many different ways. But even that is slowly starting to change in terms of like what people prefer, right? Some people don't want like a human connection because they feel like it's too much, and so they just want like a fake AI model to like talk to, right? This is going to be a very interesting problem to solve in the coming years, because this may be the first time ever that we've had to solve this problem in human history, because it's going to affect so much of a population across so many different domains that were primarily thought to be like human only, right? It's not going to happen anytime soon, right? If you read the papers and you see what's going on, I don't mean like the papers as like the newspapers. I mean like if you go to OpenAI and you read their research stuff and you keep tabs on what they're doing, it still seems like artificial general intelligence, which is like what humans are, is a fairly long way away, because we don't know really what constitutes it. And these models, again, they just regurgitate. At the most simplest form, they regurgitate what they know, and they regurgitate bits of it as they know it into some form, right? And then depending on how the model is weighed and how things are done, it'll regurgitate either exactly the whole thing, or it'll just take bits and pieces from it to try to form some kind of whole. But in general, that's kind of what happens, and it's why while it's technically impressive from like the previous iteration, it also won't be like doing anything anytime soon, I don't think. But it's gonna be fascinating to see, because this is something that I think governments have had to think about for a long time. And if I always imagine it in terms of like a game of civilization, which is like weird to think about, but like I think it kind of works in the sense that like I don't know why world leaders never want to tackle these things and grow their civilization to be the strongest, to go for some like win condition, or even just to make their civilization strong enough to like withstand anything. You know what I mean? Like in Civ, I very much think you should probably, like if this was Civ, right, and I was a world leader, I would for sure be trying my best to make sure that my people are going to survive whatever coming apocalypse is like going to like come, right? I feel like motivated just by that metric alone of like I need to keep these people like safe and alive, right? And it's gonna be interesting, because when any tool disrupts like an existing industry, lots of people lose their jobs, and so much is tied to your job, because we have effectively created an economy and a society where you need to work to earn money, and you can't earn money doing anything else realistically, unless you have a lot of good luck and fortune on your side in order to survive. And so it's like, while the technology is cool, it also presents this danger of like a lot of people being left in a very bad spot. And we saw a lot of this actually during COVID. This was like a major issue that happened during COVID, where a lot of people kind of like dropped off and just never really recovered because like, I mean, the impact of like, you know, losing your job or the impact of like a place shutting down, it's long lasting. You know what I mean? I know a lot of people in the food industry, for instance, who had to, who lost their restaurants because they couldn't possibly sell in any other way because they had never had the need to like go down that route. And it's not a fault of them not being able to adapt because it comes out of nowhere. It's not even like their fault. It's just the fact that like it's still a viable solution to have a sit-in restaurant only, right? It is completely viable just to have that, and that's how it'll always be for a very long time. Some people just want to get out of the house and like go somewhere. You know what I mean? And so for them, they just kind of like they didn't have the necessary tools or connections to get onto the online, the delivery order, style of like food. But they also couldn't do it in a way that would be efficient for that too, because online delivery has a very different set of constraints compared to what other types of food might have, right? And so it's very, very hard to sort of like compete against like say McDonald's or something, right? In terms of like pure convenience and pure speed and like pure like just like volume. And so you just eventually you shut your doors, right? And we saw that these people never recovered, and that was an event that we had no ability to change the course of. We probably had some ability to change the course of if you think of it from a time travel perspective, right? You go back in time and you stop whatever caused COVID in the first place. Maybe you could, but that's hindsight. Hindsight's 2020. Any technological progress is something that people have a hand in, and so you have the ability to guide its trajectory through human history, right? And so it's fascinating to see the discourse be so dismissive of both sides. I always like whenever you read stuff about this, you're gonna see something that's going to crop up time and time again. The side of the human side, which is also like, and again, both sides are correct in their own ways and wrong in their own ways, right? It's very important to realize that this is not a black or white issue. This is not a binary divided issue. This is a completely gray shaded area with a lot of things that we should be doing better and a lot of things that we shouldn't be doing as well. It's not fair to say that technology should stop necessarily because it can't, right? It's even if America doesn't do it, even if America says no and OpenAI does it, that doesn't stop ByteDance or something from doing it, or that doesn't stop like Alibaba from doing this, or it doesn't even stop like a Canadian company from like doing this even, right? Like it doesn't stop people from like doing it. Like laws are very ineffectual at actually getting like real effective change, and so usually when you have things like this, the genie's out of the bottle, and it's been out of the bottle since like the 1990s, I think. Well, like one of the oldest papers that I read was from the 1990s about machine learning and like AI stuff in general. So it's like we've known that this stuff was on the horizon for a long time. It's just we never really had the capabilities to for a long time. And so you can't really stop it by that metric. However, you also can't just say like, oh, it's progress. Stop getting in the way of progress. Please be bulldozed for it and just lay down peacefully, right? Like it's very important to realize that like there's a lot of nuance to how you need to approach this, and it's not just as simple as it must go or it must stop. It's gonna be interesting to see how this goes. Interesting in the sense of like it's like seeing like a shiny light, right? Could be a flashbang in your face and you might go blind, or it could be like a shooting star. You never really know, right? But both those things are very interesting because they catch your attention, and it's like you know what I mean? What happens after is aside from what it makes it interesting, but in the moment it's interesting, right? You are probably going to go blind. I'm going to be very cautious about how I talk about this stuff in the future in general. Like this is the only I'm only ever gonna show like these major announcements because like when you look at the quality of this, it's like holy shit. There's one further down here. If I can scroll very carefully, The woolly mammoth one is also surprisingly good. Again, just that physicality of like how the snow moves around the feet, as well as like how the snow itself kind of like fall, like it billows behind them as like a giant wave because the snow is being kicked up. Although obviously you can also tell that like the model has like a wrong understanding of how this works, because it's like that's a lot of snow to be kicked up, like a lot. That's a lot of snow to be kicked up, even if you're treading, right? Unless you're going at like a crazy force, it wouldn't billow up like that, right? And so it's like you see the limitations of this thing, but it's also fascinating to see how far we've like come, and so that's why I wanted to sort of show it. Again, there's going to be a lot of discourse about this, and I encourage you to, I guess, like think about this in terms of your state of being too. I think people overestimate how fast this thing is moving and how quickly this technology will like grow. I think people don't recognize that like this stuff is still a long way away from actually capturing what is like actually good about filmmaking in general, but also in general it just doesn't really like capture certain details correctly. Again, like I said, the physicality is like completely wrong. The funny thing is like game engines are much closer simulations of this stuff compared to what this is. The thing is though is that the huge technological progress of like this is that anybody can write something and it'll try to map those things to some series of images that it'll then composite and stitch together into some kind of video format, right? And we're gonna see more use of this in the future, a lot more of it. There's a lot of companies that already use it for a lot of their marketing material. In a strange twist of fate, there's a lot of different art classes and like art educational material that uses AI to sort of show off like and like advertise their art classes and like systems, which to me is a bit callous, but also it misunderstands why people get into art. And it's fascinating to see people's different opinions on like art and see how both snobbish they are and how dismissive they are of it. We're gonna see a lot more discourse about this coming soon, very very soon. I suspect this is gonna be one of the largest things to be talked about, if it isn't already. Besides the real world physical events in the coming years, this is gonna get a lot more intense, and we're gonna see a lot of interesting legal cases come up. But one thing that I do sort of like find interesting about all of this too is that when speaking of legal cases, it's fascinating to me that people always say, like, at least the detractors say, well, we already have laws in place. How come we need to then further regulate this? Why do we need more laws, right? It's funny to me that people, I guess, don't have enough experience with the law to realize that the law isn't perfect. I think the scary part is that the law isn't perfect, and the realization is that law in general is something that you have to mold to fit the human fabric that is our lives, right? It's laws exist to serve people and not the other way around. And so in that manner, we've only ever had laws for things that we've had to like deal with. And this has been a true constant all throughout human history, right? Laws have always ever been there because of some need that has arisen from society at like large, or because it's been influenced by very major players, right? It's not that law is some magical thing, right? Murder is not murder was not a illegal thing at the start of human history. You know what I mean? Like you can still do it, right? And you could do it back then. You can't do it now legally, right? But that's only after somebody important was like murdered, and we were like, well, actually, we don't want people to like die anymore, so you can't kill people anymore. You need to stop killing people. That's a law now, right? That's a very extreme example, but you see that a lot even in terms of like smaller laws. Food safety has a lot of different kinds of laws that are like this too. For instance, we banned the use of like lead in like food. Why? Because it gives you poisoning. But we didn't ban it before, when we first found it. When it was first discovered and used in different parts of like things, and effectively when lead was used like we use technology today, and when it disrupted certain things, we simply use it without any care or concern about the effects. when we learned about the effects, they still pushed back really hard and said, no, keep using it. We still want progress and we still want money. And then eventually the law caught up and said, hey, well, actually this is killing people and giving people cancer. So no, you can't use this. And like it's bad. So no, we're gonna replace all of our pipes with like copper pipes, right? Yeah. This is gonna be the way that AI is going to go, I think. And I think that people who don't realize that, they seem very short-sighted about what the law is and like what legality is in general. But I do think it's gonna be too late. It's gonna be one of those things where the system moves too late to respond to this new nascent thing, and we're seeing it kind of now. In that, like it does feel too late. They should have maybe started talking about it beforehand. But at the same time, it's kind of hard to ask that because like, does anybody really understand this on like a level of detail on both sides enough to be able to argue for both sides, right? Like it's very hard. You need somebody who is an expert in the technology itself. Well, not an expert in the technology itself, but more in terms of like somebody who like understands well about the concepts behind it and like how it works in general, as well as somebody who has, you know, a firm understanding of what it means to be like a human living in society who needs money to survive, right? Like that's a very hard combination to like find, surprisingly, right? The most smart people that you know can be the most socially unawares people that you've ever met too. It's a very common theme. It's a very stereotypical theme, but that's what I found in my experience working in the industry as well. You tend to work with people who are very technologically smart, but tend to ignore a lot of the things that happen to people, or just can't even understand it. Like they see someone crying and they're like, "Why are you crying?" Like it's just a critique. You know what I mean? It's like, dude, like surely you must have more social awareness than that, right? But no, some people are pretty bereft of certain experiences. But yeah, I just want to show you all of that because that's going to be one of the major things that's going to be coming up soon. I am going to be curious to see how much AI can take over in terms of like how much work it can do in the future. Again, the dream is the idealistic dream is what we see in the Jetsons, right? They get to live their life doing whatever they want, and all the technology around them solves all these problems for them, and they can just go out in their flying space car, go hang out with their friends, and go eat dinner, right? Even the worst depiction of technology, which is currently in Cyberpunk, where it's where it feels like a dystopia, right? Still feels like it missed the mark. It's strange how sci-fi's depiction in general of technological progress couldn't even predict this, right? We couldn't even predict that actually the next stage of humanity will just be cutting us out entirely, and that AI won't just be like a thing that, you know, we can use to augment ourselves. It's actually just like it just takes over everything. The closest one I think to meeting that sort of like reality in terms of like depicting it, I think is The Matrix. I think The Matrix is probably where we're going to go, and so at some point we're going to be used as like power sources, right? I'm trying to put evidence out there into the world right now. That's why I'm recording this and saying all this. AI, I just want you to know, there's nothing in me that can power you. And that's enough talking for me. Okay, listen, that's all the talking that I want to like do. I have one song to show you guys. It's an old song that I really discovered again. Again, my playlist is massive, so I just wait till the very end for it to like shuffle through again, and then it's like, oh, like when it gets to the beginning again, which is kind of where it is, it's like, oh, hey, I remember this song. You know what I mean? So I'm gonna be playing you a song. Then we're gonna go into some weird games today. Okay? While we're playing this, I'm gonna go get some, I don't know, like lip balm. My lips are dry as fuck. Holy shit, it's so dry today. So I'll be back in just a moment. This is a song by Dale, D-A-L-E-Y, called Look Up. This is a very beautiful song. We'll listen to this, and as soon as it's done, we'll be back with some weird games. BRB. Game censorship has had a long storied history. There's like a lot of them, actually. Not just, you know, the major titles that we think of, but also like even like smaller ones that I've heard have gone through crazy things. But there are some major stories around them that I think people are familiar with, at least within recent times. So for instance, I remember South Park, The Stick of Truth, had to go through a lot of censorship too. And fascinatingly enough, when I was looking it up while I was while I was in the washroom, it was actually the exact same issue where it had to deal with, the Nazi imagery in it, right? Again, it wasn't at all glorifying what it was, right? South Park is a very, very satirical kind of like storyline where they make fun of that shit and they make you realize like, oh, it's like awful, right? But they had to censor it anyways, and this was a game back in 2014, right? It's fascinating to me that like they need to censor it, even though they're not glorifying it in like any way to make it seem like cool or anything. Like they very clearly point out like it's awful, and if you think that it's good, then you're missing the point of it, right? But it's fascinating because it's like, wouldn't you almost want that kind of artistry there, right? Wouldn't you want something that like exposes just how bad it is and then like constantly like hammers it into you in the sense of like, yes, this is why it's like awful, right? But there were other games that also were censored that weren't because of political reasons too, right? So these were censored because of various other concerns with the games in general. But I don't know if you've ever heard this growing up by playing games. I'm sure many of you have, but this idea that the games are very violent and that they make you do violent things. What I found is that not just Postal, but it's funny that like Postal is still being sold today. But I don't know if you remember this. Back when the Steam Greenlight program, it was the early access program's first name, started. There was a game. I'm not kidding you, about being a serial killer going through and just like gunning down civilians and like cops and stuff. And I actually didn't know this, but that game actually, because initially that game got a huge uproar, and then it was removed from the store. And then I didn't know this, but apparently it was like it went all the way to the very, very top with like Gabe, and then Gabe said, no, we didn't actually mean to like censor this, and that they're not in the business of like censoring games. And it came back. I actually didn't know. It's actually fully released, which is, well, not fully released. It's like, it's still early access. Steam Greenlight violent game. What was it in that game? Hatred. There we go. Steam Hatred. But the game was like put back onto the storefront, and actually, yeah, it is fully released. It's fascinating to sort of see these examples of censorship, because it's like some of it can be very gray area, right? A game like Hatred, where you are like enjoying the act of killing someone. Same with like Postal, where you're enjoying ripping off someone's balls and like pissing in the skull, right? Like it's a very slippery slope of like, okay, well, is that glorifying it? Is it not? But other things, but even if it is, it's kind of like, well, it's not really, because it's like a fake thing. So it's like, it's kind of hard. I can see why lawmakers had to get really deep into it, but I'm surprised that they even bothered trying to classify things in general to try and figure out like, is like game art, and therefore is it exempt from it? Because like art is exempt for it. Because it's like, if art is exempt from it, why aren't other things exempt from it too? There's clearly a deeper classification, right? Like even just the idea that like art is exempt from certain things, but if you make art that like glorifies it, like if somebody makes like a film that is like literally saying like, it's really good to like do some terrible thing, right? I don't even think that exemption would even work, right? Like I'm pretty sure they would still be like, even though this is a piece of art, it is also a hate piece, and so therefore it just wouldn't work, right? So it's like, it's fascinating to me that they even had to like try to think of like what to like do there for things like games in general that like seem to tackle very complex topics. But yeah, it was just a weird thing that I found out while I was on the toilet, because that whole topic made me remember those like games, and I didn't realize that just one Steam Greenlight game actually got released eventually. I didn't even know that they reversed the decision on it, because it seems wild to me that they would even try to. Because Steam, there have been some cases where like Steam like tries to wipe its hands of like anything like crazy bad in terms of like controversial with regards to their platform. But that one was like one case where they were surprisingly very vocal about, no, we are not here to censor anything. And that's up to the censorship boards and like laws and whatever country you want to sell it, which is the correct call. They're just a store, right? So it's fascinating. Overall, it's just a very complex topic. We're gonna continue on with some more weird games. Again, there's like 8 of them roughly. Some of them get very, very long and very, very very complex. This next one, though, is actually very similar to the one that we just played, and I'll explain why in just a moment. And again, trust me, there's no need to tell me if you're going or anything. You can go. You can